Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the people of Tamazo, Fournier, Alemon, Dubonnet, Montpanache, Montpaille and Lower Grand Ravine, La Belleville, New Village and Richmond, La Pelle and Patat, La Ressource and Tila Ressource, Gadet and Tigadet, Despin, Montfoin, La Rivière, Sedini, New Jack, and Montego Bay, Belmont and Varsity, Austin Hill, Montpanache, Babawa, and Mr. Speaker, for the 10th time in as many years, I rise on behalf of the people in a little enclave known as Fort-Maurice in Denier Rivière, where I grew up and where I live. Mr. Speaker, it is on behalf of the people of the communities that I've just mentioned that I rise to make a contribution to the debate on the estimates for 2021-2022. The communities I've mentioned, Mr. Speaker, when grouped together for election and electoral purposes, are ascribed the collective label Dennery North. And it is on their behalf, Mr. Speaker, that I stand to be a voice of advocacy and a voice of reason. Soon from today, Mr. Speaker, our country will be going to the polls. And in much the same way they did in 2011 and 2016, they have pledged in the majority to once again repose their confidence in Shawn Edward to be the parliamentary representative for Dennery North and parts of the Mabuya Valley. And so today, Mr. Speaker, I feel duty-bound to express my gratitude to the people of Dennery North. Mr. Speaker, je voulais prendre l'occasion pour remercier les Dennery North, Jean-Gouin-Rivière, Wifon, Guavine, La Pelle, La Ressource, Gadet, Olion, Despin, Belmont, et puis Dennery Rivière. Pour remercier pour si pour pour dernier 10 l'année, that moi ja venu ici et puis parler bayo et puis parler about bail qui affecté yo comme membre parlement pour Dennery North. But Mr. Speaker, before I move on to the substantive matter before the House, with your indulgence and that of my parliamentary colleagues on both sides, I want to reach out to a friend and a fellow candidate of the St. Lucia Labour Party in the person of Jeremiah Norbert, SLP endorsed candidate for Miku North, who, as you know, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House would know, as would the entire nation, that the brother was involved in a very unfortunate accident a few weeks ago. But thankfully, he is recovering nicely in Martinique. He's in good spirits, and on behalf of the people of Dennery North, I want to wish him a speedy recovery. Quickly, Mr. Speaker, I will mention a next-door neighbor in the person of Dexter who had surgery just a couple days ago. He too is recovering nicely. And we have a lot of persons in constituency who have not been well of late. And I want to profit the opportunity, as I said, with your indulgence, to wish them a very speedy recovery. Mr. Speaker, another financial year, another set of estimates, another national budget. This time to the tune of $1,638,600,900. Mr. Speaker, I must, as the parliamentary rep for Dennery North, ask a few questions. What is in this year's estimates for the people of Dennery North? What should the people of Dennery North expect with a budget of $1.6 billion? Est-ce et puis un budget neuf que le gouvernement y plan pour dépenser $1.6 billion? Est-ce nous avons soulagement les l'argent ça a tapé dépensé par les gens en constituency et puis gens cette liste entièrement? I recall last year, Mr. Speaker, while debating the estimates, and in the build-up to the budgetary process, So convinced was I at the time that the general election was near. And so I tried as much as possible to liken this term of government to the life of an average secondary school child. In here, I said, Mr. Speaker, last year, that some students, they go into the secondary school program where they spend 5 years, they waste time, and when the 5th year creeps up on them, Mr. Speaker, with nothing to show, they get a burst of enthusiasm and energy to do the work in 1 year that they were not able to do in 5 years. This, Mr. Speaker, is the best illustration I can find to speak to the performance and the disposition of this government after 5 years. The returns, based on what we see in the estimates, have been dismal. Wasted time. A tenure that lacked focus. Misguided priorities. And the government has run out of time. And in a desperate attempt, Mr. Speaker, to salvage a performance and face, things are being attempted overnight. Things that could not have been done in 5 years, all of a sudden you expect them to be realizable in 1 year. The government has run out of time. Mr. Speaker, with the estimates before us, we are looking at $1.6 billion. This is the 5th time since the general election of 2016 that a member from Mikud South, Minister for Finance and Prime Minister, would be coming to the Parliament with a set of estimates. In 2017-2018, Mr. Speaker, he presided over a budget, or he presented to this honorable House a budget of $1,513,652,200. The following year, 2018-2019, he presented in this House a budget of $1,487,583,200. That was followed, Mr. Speaker, in 2019-2020 by $1,591,589,000. 2020-2021, $1.6 billion. And in 2021-2022, today, Mr. Speaker, before us, we have a budget of $1.6 billion. A total of $7.9 billion having been brought into this honorable House by way of estimates or money to be spent for the advancement of our country. And as the figures are presented, Mr. Speaker, or as the figures were presented, the Prime Minister attempted to give cursory explanations of the different programs contained in this year's estimates. What he said was uninspiring. No sector, Mr. Speaker, based on their pronouncements subsequent to the estimates having been presented, was inspired. The bus drivers are not inspired by what is before us. The farmers have not been inspired, and if the Prime Minister did not do sufficient to inspire them, Mr. Speaker, I was hoping that the inspiration for farmers would have come from the presentation made by the member for Babono, who has ministerial responsibility for agriculture. Same story. I did not see a single line item, or there isn't a single line item in the estimates that speaks to the fisher folk of this country. Maybe I missed it, Mr. Speaker. The little shop owners, Mr. Speaker, have not been inspired. And for 5 years, since the 6th of June, 2016, as I said, almost $10 billion having been presided over. Is St. Lucia a better place for it? Is the life of the average person in Oli or Gardet, La Pelle, Richford, Grand Riviere, and Denier Riviere, Grand Ravine, better for it? Mr. Speaker, I do not have confidence that the estimates as presented by the Honorable Prime Minister and member for Miku South will give birth to anything different from what we've witnessed from this government in the last 5 years. Mr. Speaker, permit me to reference Head 41, Department of Agriculture, Fisheries, Natural Resources and Cooperatives. With a recurrent allocation of $28,505,400 and a capital allocation of $29,407,800, giving that agency a grand total of $57.9 million. What should I expect on behalf of the farmers of this country? What is the state of the agriculture sector today? What can we expect from $57.9 million allocated to the agriculture sector, Mr. Speaker? What will be different from the abject failures of the past 5 years? Since this administration came into office, Mr. Speaker, the 5th budget, and in much the same way, I presented the figures leading to today's debate. Permit me to do the same, Mr. Speaker, for Head 41. In 2017-2018, $70.1 million for the agency, Agriculture, Fisheries, Natural Resources, and Cooperatives. In 2018-2019, $47.9 million. In 2019-2020, $53 million. In 2020-21, $56 million. And this year, Mr. Speaker, the ministry or the department has been allocated $57.9 million. In the 5 budgets that this administration has presided over, the ministry or the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries, Natural Resources and Cooperatives has been allocated $285.7 million. Pour cette année, le gouvernement a tapé en office depuis qu'il y a une élection. Il a venu au Parlement 5 fois, 4 avant le Premier ministre a présenté l'estimate hier. Écoutez tout ça, Mr. Speaker. Département agricole, pêche, et puis bagaille comme ça, j'ai joint $285.7 millions. Et nous avons des questions. Est-ce que le secteur agricole, après toute l'argent que j'ai dépensé, dans plus de l'État, actuellement, parce que les nous allons au gouvernement le 6 juin 2016. Mr. Speaker, my intention is never to make any minister look bad. And if I raise my voice, it is because of the passion with which I speak on behalf of the people whom I represent. Mr. Speaker, the Minister for Agriculture and member for Babonneau, he spoke before me, and he mentioned almost every program that is itemized under the Department of Government for which he has ministerial responsibility. But I noticed when it was time to speak about the banana industry, he lost his enthusiasm. And his tone was tantamount to that of someone who had been given responsibility for the midday obituaries on national radio or television. Solemn, uninspiring, calm, and in the 15 or so, 11 minutes, based on my watch, that he spent speaking of bananas, Mr. Speaker, I did not hear anything coming from him that would have provided some respite or some soulagement for the banana farmers of this country. Mr. Speaker, still on the Head 41, line item, Banana Productivity Improvement Project. That particular line item, Mr. Speaker, has been allotted $2.6 million. And most of that money, as has been the custom in the last few years, would go to remuneration of the people who worked with that particular agency and support personnel. Gouvernement jamais été en budget là pour l'année ça là. 2,6 millions de dollars pour abattre affaires figues en pays simple ici. Et pour un ministre, et bien, le département gouvernement, qui n'y 57 millions de dollars, 57,9 millions de dollars, ou qu'à seulement mettre 2,6 millions pour les affaires figues, et que 2,6 millions ça là, en chaque l'argent ça, ni pour aller pour payer les gens qui travaillent en agency figue. So, qui manière ou qu'à ça va battre situation live spot et puis tout l'autre problème femme figue. Mr. Speaker, last year, speaking to the estimates, I said that the allocation for the Banana Productivity Improvement Project was grossly insufficient and not commensurate with the challenges of this industry. With $2.6 million on the head 41 of this year, Mr. Speaker, that amount cannot realistically address the plight of the banana farmer in this country. The industry is in its worst state. That is the worst it has been in the last 20 years. Ça c'est plus dernier degré industrie figue j'attrape koi en dernier 20 ans moun ka planter figue. And in the last 5 years, this is the second lowest allocation that we have seen for banana, for the banana industry. Et qu'on est quoi that à même l'air industrie en privé condition, c'est le gouvernement qui a mis plus l'argent. The only time in the last 5 years when more or less was allocated, to the banana program was in 2020-2021 when 2.5 million was allocated. So, Mr. Speaker, if the government had a true appreciation of the plight of banana farmers and the situation that confronts the industry, there would have been a bigger allocation to see a bigger effort to address the problems of the banana industry. And I will say, as I have said before, Mr. Speaker, that when you have a thriving banana industry, my constituency is a better place. St. Lucia is a better place. The rural economy in those little pockets are better communities, and the families are better off for it. There are still many families that rely on banana production, Mr. Speaker, as a form of livelihood. And when the pronouncement was made, I, Mr. Speaker, was hopeful that we would have been able to secure a market. But with that amount quoted here today, 2.6 million, that cannot be sufficient to address all of what the minister mentioned or outlined during his presentation, and at the same time try and secure markets with $2.6 million. A paltry amount, grossly insufficient, Mr. Speaker. We all know of the contribution of that industry to the development of this country. Ek nou sav sa en place Koden Rinoff. Ek Jean Babono sav sa. Ek Jean Vieux Noff sav sa. Jean Ozo sav sa. Se fig ki tiye pay ale kay moun ko gwa maman mwen. Ek mette galvanize. Fig vwe adan nou University, Mr. Speaker. Jodi a uni ish fama ka teach a tertiary level institutions. Ka head ki departement en gouvernement. Ek mwen ka di, même si fig pa sa ite en kometan ki pase, la still ni un gros rôle pour fig jouer à développement commune, especially ces communes qui dans ville. Mr. Speaker, I don't expect the banana industry to return to the commanding heights of our economy, and I will never try to pit agriculture against tourism, as was being indicated this morning. But Mr. Speaker, that amount as presented, 2.6 on the head 41, line item, Banana Productivity Improvement Project, that will not give our farmers any kind of soulagement as it relates to the development of our countries. Mr. Speaker, still on the head 41, I perused the estimates from table of contents to the appendix, and I did not see fisheries mentioned at all. What should the fishers of this country expect with a budget in excess of $1 billion? Not a solitary mention of the fisher folk in the estimates that we are debating today. With a closed fish marketing corporation and fishers having to be on the road late night, Mr. Speaker, what do we say to our constituents who have a vested interest in that particular subsector? What do you say to Jimo and Baba, Nixon, Fouchette, Koch, Michel on the Daito? When they come and they ask, what is in the estimates, and I carry my copy with me, absolutely no mention of the fisher folk. Pêcher, pas ouais, la pas ni rien, moi j'ai ouais un estimate ça là, qui kay bay soulagement pour ces pêcheurs pays nous, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, permit me to move on to head 56 of the estimates. Department of Economic Development, Transport and Civil Aviation. A recurrent allocation of $23.5 million and a capital allocation of $40.6 million. Giving that particular agency a grand total of $64.2 million. Mr. Speaker, of particular interest to me and the people of Dennery North, whom I represent in this House, is the line item Constituency Development Program, otherwise known as CDP. In the 5 estimates that have been presented in this Honorable House, the Constituency Development Program, as a program within the Agency of Economic Development, Transport and Civil Aviation, has been allocated the following amounts. 2017-2018, $19.1 million. 2018-2019, $18.6 million. 2019-2020, $10.6 million. 2020-2021, $17.6 million. And this year, Mr. Speaker, the CDP, or Constituency Development Program, excellent program initiated by a former UWP administration, has been allocated $10.6 million. Mr. Speaker, in the 5 years, the CDP program housed or accounted for on the head 56 of the estimates has been allocated $76.7 million. Mr. Speaker, I'm only this Constituency Development Program que le gouvernement Taïwan a baillé l'argent pour faire des projets en toute constituency. En 5 années depuis le gouvernement Flabo venu en pouvoir. Programme ça, j'ai tapé plus que 76 millions de dollars pour faire projet en community tout bâton cette ici. Et dis-moi ça là, Mr. Speaker. Là, nous 6 qui ont les façades opposition. Pas un projet, nous pièces, j'ai tapé pour faire un bas programme ça là. Tous ces programmes ça là, j'ai fait, Mr. Speaker, seulement par membres qui ont représenté le gouvernement ça là en pouvoir. Et nous avons dit, Mr. Speaker, that cannot be right. And Mr. Speaker, there are members on the other side who agree with us that this is not right. That the amount on the head 56 for Constituency Development Program has to be shared, Mr. Speaker, in such a way that members on both sides of the House would get to preside over development initiatives in their constituencies. And when we were on the other side of this parliamentary divide, this is not how it was done, Mr. Speaker. But today, Mr. Speaker, you lost. You didn't win, so you won't know anything about that. You were beaten in Soufrière. The member for Dennery South can attest to that he presided over projects in his constituency. And here's the member for Miku Fruyu, Mr. Speaker, Miku North. She too will admit that when the St. Lucia Labour Party, and I'm prepared to yield to her on a point of order, for her to stand in this house and tell the people of St. Lucia that she did not preside over constituency development projects in her constituency when she was in opposition. And I will challenge the member for Castries North to do the same. I am prepared to yield. If they can stand on a point of order and tell me the information I'm providing is inaccurate. Mr. Speaker, between 2011 and 2016, every elected MP in St. Lucia presided over CDP projects. But today, after 5 years, when we are busy building a new St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, $76.7 million of CDP, we cannot, Mr. Speaker, preside over a single project in constituency where we can bring relief and assistance to the people who repose their confidence in us and give us a mandate to come in here and speak on their behalf. Still, on the line item, Constituency Development Program, Mr. Speaker, Head 56. When they came in, the Alemon Road in Grand Riviere, the contracts were already prepared and signed. It wasn't a case where they had to be costed, Mr. Speaker, or bills of quantities had to be prepared. They were signed. They never honored the contract. $70-odd million. And the people cannot get their road up to a day like today. But if elections on the horizon, you'll hear about Kudme. You will see people carrying blocks. Is that what the people of Dennery North and Alemon are worth, Mr. Speaker? Can they not expect? Can they not expect, Mr. Speaker, their share of the pie as taxpayers? We tackled that particular road under the CDP, phase 1, from the highway right up to June. And contracts were signed from June to Wayne, otherwise known as ICE, Cosmos, Apa Yellow, Morena, Credential, Donet, Marubes, BAM, Jeanette, all the people who live in that area had expectations that they were going to get a new road because the contracts were already signed. 5 years later, Mr. Speaker, nothing has been done, Mr. Speaker. Nothing has been done on this road. But you're resorting to a Kudme approach. When in the next door or neighboring constituency, DVRP, Plainfield upgraded Lakai, Dennery South, Bolo Bell, Bois Joli, but you want the people of Alemon in Dennery North, because they voted for the St. Lucia Labour Party in the majority, to resort to a Kudme. The day will soon come, Mr. Speaker, when they will give expressions in the ballot box. Mr. Speaker, still on the Constituency Development Program, like the road in Alemon, Austin Hill, the contracts were signed. Phase 1 was done, and the remaining phases, Mr. Speaker, we will advance. Contracts were already signed. Again, that was stopped because in Austin Hill, they vote in the majority for Shawn Edward and the St. Lucia Labour Party. So that today, people like Jupi, Darren, Eric and his family, Matthew, Matida, George, Noella, Werner, Hayden, Roderick, Rivi, Aidan, Kedan, and all of them, Mr. Speaker, I have said to them that they just need to be a little patient. Their road will come. Because this United Workers' Party government will not be the ones presiding over the budget that they are passing in this honorable house at this sitting. We will, with the amount allocated, the 10 million allocated, Mr. Speaker, Alemon and all the other parts of constituency will finally see the realization of the projects that we had previously identified. Because there will be a change at the head of the ship of state. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn my attention to Head 52. The department is Education, Innovation, and Gender Relations. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I see you glance at your book. Head 52. been allocated a recurrent amount of $209 million, or $209.6 million. A capital allocation of $27.4 million, giving them a grand total of $247 million for this financial year. I would have been happy, Mr. Speaker, to speak to several of the line items under this particular department, or this particular head. But today I will confine myself to speak only to the e-books program as contained in this year's budget. $6.8 million. The Ministry or the Department of Education, Innovation and Gender Relations, in a 5-year period, has been allocated by this Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, and by extension, this government, the whopping amount of $1.03 billion. Mr. Speaker. Député Parti Flambeau vini gouvernement. Département Éducation, Innovation et puis ça fait gender. J'ai joint un budget pour 5 années, gouvernement Flambeau j'ai amené un budget en caille consiste. 1.03 pas million de billion dollars. And Mr. Speaker, you would have thought that with that quantum having been allocated to the agency, today, the children of St. Lucia would not be scrambling all over the place for smart devices. But we come with 6.8 million as a line item, and we are promising that we will be giving children e-books. Mr. Speaker, if this government, in the interest of the children of St. Lucia, can tomorrow morning procure smart devices for every single child in this country, I would support them, Mr. Speaker. But they played politics with that. And there are times, and I've made the point before, government and governance has to be a continuum. It cannot be a case where every time the government changes, everything must be brought to a halt, and then people suffer. There are areas where you have to allow certain programs to roll out. And Mr. Speaker, I am sure that the government today is regretting having stopped the laptop program. And whether you call it laptop or you call it e-books, the point that is being underscored here, moving forward, Mr. Speaker, is that our children, in order for them to be competitive on a global level, they must be in a position where they can access smart devices. And he said, and you heard the Prime Minister tell you it's not the same. And we can stand here and debate all day e-books versus laptop computers. Mr. Speaker, what is important is that when the St. Lucia Labour Party was in government, there was a recognition of a need to incorporate technology in education service delivery. So that, Mr. Speaker, every child, whether your parents were rich or poor, you would have been able over time to access a smart device to give you a competitive advantage. So that the child who comes from the family that is affluent would not have been in a superior position than a child whose parents cannot afford. That is the gap that we were trying to close. Majority personne pas de savent de la COVID. Pour parents qui viennent la caille MPs et puis l'autre monde dans la société qui a demandé yo est-ce que pas une pièce de laptop pour servir pour bailler ish moins. Ti maman moi pour vous faire SBA because you need devices, Mr. Speaker. $6.8 million in this year's budget to procure e-books. It represents a start, but is that too little, too late? How many children will benefit from that, Mr. Speaker? We should not have been in that situation today. And in as much as we did not foresee the challenges of COVID in relation to instruction delivery and pedagogical matters in education, had the program been allowed to continue, Mr. Speaker, this is not where we would have found ourselves. $6.8 million. E-book program is supposed to solve that problem. And I know First then, Mr. Speaker, what technology in education and the school system can do. I spent 6 years at the Clinton Mason Secondary School. I taught all the computer-related subjects, IT, EDPM. When CXC transitioned from a paper-based registration program, I presided over the introduction of the electronic registration system. And at that school, we had one lab with 25 computers. And every single child at the school was enrolled in the IT program. You know why? Because we had a philosophy at the school. And I've said it here before, your ability to use the technology is tantamount to you being able to tell the time. But it was not enough, the 40 minutes in the lab. You needed a device to take home to ensure continuity and reinforcement of in-class concepts. That is how you move, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 40 computers in a lab for 500 children. There was a case for procurement of laptop and smart devices. But today the argument is not whether we should have made devices available, but whether it should be e-books or laptop computers. That is the narrow path we want to take the argument. Mr. Speaker, permit me at this juncture to move to Head 53, Department of Wellness, Health and Wellness, Head 53. And if I have to sound or be repetitive and monotonous, you'll have to forgive me, Mr. Speaker. Recurrent allocation, $174.8 million. Capital allocation, $14.7 million. Giving the Department of Health and Wellness the very impressive total or allocation of $189.5 million. Mr. Speaker, am I to expect with that allocation, and I said it was Head 53, Mr. Speaker, to make sure I'm not mistaken, should I expect the reinstatement of the Larissus Health Center? Again, I went through every page of the estimates, looking for it as the line item it was in the budget of 2016-2017. It was a line item. It was a capital project for which grant funding provisions were made for grant funding. Jik toujours. Yotiye. But we've been there before. Mr. Speaker, in 2016-2017, this particular agency was allocated $146.05 million. And in that amount, there was a provision for the Larissus Health Center. And the retort has been, 5 years, l'année, il fait pour un grand monde garder Belmont au lieu d'Espin. Try marcher pour aller gap là pour aller right pour aller oui fond. Because nous te la nous pas fait, et qu'on la la pas fait. But if that is the attitude and that is the disposition, Mr. Speaker, I am not as disheartened today as I would have been 2 years ago. And to quote you, Mr. Speaker, or should I say like you, I know the hour, and I think you said you know the times that we're in. To use the colloquial jargon of a fellow Caribbean country, the day soon come, Mr. Speaker, soon come. I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, with the flexibility and the powers granted to him by this Finance Act, that the Prime Minister makes adjustments to the budget, Mr. Speaker, to make a case for the people of Denrinoff as it relates to the Larissus Health Center. C'est mon cas pigé pour Health Center because mon cas représenté ou moi c'est membre Labour Party. Continuez à pini moi, mais moi Health Center ba c'est mon. Et si vous voulez faire une loi comme moi parler Health Center ça OK mais moi ba c'est gros mon. Moi ba c'est mon. Mais moi veux dire je Denrinoff. Poche. Pas avec un top décomporté. La caille un jour qui ka vini tout de suite. Et même si yo back there, là ni un go choma son there yo pas ça back pour tout le temps. Et joua ka vini ko élection qui t'a écoué. Mr. Speaker, Head 46. The Department of Tourism, Broadcasting and Information, Culture and Creative Industries. Recurrent, $21.4 million. Capital, $14.5 million. The grand total of $35.9 million. Mr. Speaker, I did not see anything definitive in relation to the creative industries sector. But I'm hoping somewhere, even if I wasn't able to pick it out, that in that amount of $45.9 million, the young artists of Denry North, LT, Ampa, Mighty, Sebans, Colton, Kirtley and the others will be able to get some form of benefit from this program. Mr. Speaker, this is how Jamaica emerged to become what they are on the global music stage. Their young people and their artists were given avenues to express themselves. I'm hoping that whereas this will not take care of all our creative industries' needs, and whereas I'm only confining my contribution to this particular Head 46, to assistance for budding artists, there are a lot of other sectors subsectors within the creative industry sector, Mr. Speaker, that will be looking for assistance from this allocation. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am hoping that the artists that I've mentioned and others who are aspiring to use their creative talents to hopefully earn a livelihood one day will begin to find support in this. Nous n'y a shy jeune moun den Renoff et puis on cette ici qui ni talent. Mais de là nous c'est un pays que les moun venir et qui dit nous jeunes moun yo vle faire ci et yo ça fait ça. Nous pas jamais trop intéressé de là pour couper ça yo ni pour dire ça ni pour chanter. Et que les seuls ça yo besoin from nous, c'est un petit support, un petit encouragement. Et moi ka croire that it be $45.9 million. En département gouvernement qu'on creative industries, ces jeunes artistes là qui ka chanter et qui ka faire l'autre bagaille, qui ka qualify comme creative industries, qui t'a payé aider à bas programme gouvernement ça là. Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have? Mr. Speaker, I want to move on to Head 46. There's nothing some of you would like to see more than me wrapping up. I still have 5 other heads.
17 minutes.
How much?
17 minutes.
70?
17.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Department of Home Affairs and National Security. And security has been a talking point in this country for a while. And it is important, Mr. Speaker, for me to preface my comments, my contribution to Head 46 by saying, and it is something I've said, it's something that the leader of the opposition has said, it is something my colleagues on this side have always said and said consistently. No political party, no citizen benefits from lawlessness, criminality, and crime. Crime is our business. The 17 of us in here, we all have a responsibility to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that we conduct ourselves and we take on our responsibilities as elected men and women in such a way that the criminality that has spiraled out of control in this country is arrested, pardon the pun, and brought under control. Because nobody is immune. Nous, à la façade, ça n'a pas jamais célébrer crime. Nous ne pouvons pas faire comme l'autre façade là, Mr. Speaker. Et venir et puis dire qu'il fait barrage et blâmer l'autre monde pour crime. Et que les gens venir pour yo ou abattre la situation crime dans le pays. Ils ne savent pas pour tourner. Qui ne savent pas pour tourner? Qui ne savent pas pour tourner? Nous tous capés pour lui. Si nous ne faisons pas barrage et fait vitement. Home Affairs and National Security. A recurrent amount of $119.5 million, complemented by a capital amount of $7.89 million. Given that particular agency, Mr. Speaker, Head 46, Agency, Home Affairs and National Security, the quantum of $127.4 million. That, even if all of 127 million, if all that had to be assigned or allocated or directed to the efforts of the Royal Central Police Force, that would not have been sufficient to fight the crime situation, the lawlessness and criminality in our country today. So from that amount, the only line item I see there for the police is again the paltry amount of $2.3 million repairs to police facilities. The police are frontliners, as we've been able to categorize some of our public servants of late, and all the support they get, they deserve, and they need more. I'm hoping that from that $2.3 million for the repairs of police facilities, Mr. Speaker, that once and for all, the Southern Divisional Headquarters, which some persons might refer to as the Viewfort Police Station, the problems of that particular facility will be addressed once and for all, and that the police can utilize it. Because it provides a comfort level that is supposed to make them more efficient. There are issues at the Richmond Police Station in my constituency. And Mr. Speaker, coincidentally, the officer in charge happens to be in the chamber with us. This government facility resides within the confines of my constituency. I have seen firsthand how they have gone out in the last year. There may have been times when their approach had been questioned by constituents. But you know what should never be lost in this? Is the consistency and the dedication with which they've gone out to serve the people of that particular constituency. And of course, Richford working in collaboration with the Dennery Police Station under the command of ASP Alexander. With $2.3 million to repair police facilities, I am hoping that some of the little attendant issues we have at the Richmond Police Station will be addressed. Mr. Speaker, it is not fair to ask citizens to make sacrifices on behalf of the country if we do not demonstrate as leaders that we are prepared to meet them halfway. The label frontline workers is not one that the police have a monopoly on. And in much the same way that I peruse the estimates, and more specifically Head 36, looking for allocations to address the issues of the Royal Central Police Force, I had to do the same on behalf of the hundreds of fire personnel who are serving this country every day, weekend to weekend, holidays, morning, noon, and night. And I have to say to them, through you, Mr. Speaker, and they too, when they have a chance, can look at the estimates and pay attention to Head 46. And all they will find in the estimates is a paltry $200,000 for repair to fire station and to provide general relief for firefighters in this country. Mr. Speaker, the firemen and firewomen of this country have made a lot of sacrifices. A lot of what I can say and need to say with respect to the fire personnel of this country would be better suited for the debate on the appropriation bill. But for too long, like the correctional officers, Mr. Speaker, they feel left out. And this is what they tell you in private conversations, that the police seem to be getting all the attention. And I will admit to them sometimes that the police has a more strenuous job to do than them. And that is not me in any way trying to sidestep or diminish the efforts that they make. But they're critical. I have seen men traverse the Bad Little 3, 4, 5 times in the night with that ambulance when duty calls, Mr. Speaker. And they do not flinch, they do not cower. They do it with pride and dignity. And I'm saying, when they see, and it's a very serious argument, you know, they look at the estimates. We almost have the same number of police fire stations as we do police stations. Fire stations, police station. Maybe there's just a slight difference. They have the same issues. They need the same comfort levels at work. And if you can find 2.3 million for the police, and I think the police deserve more, I do not believe, Mr. Speaker, 200,000 can resonate. Maybe there is something that the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance knows that we don't know. And I'm sure he'll probably provide clarification, Mr. Speaker, where that is concerned. Mr. Speaker, as I prepare to conclude my presentation, I want to invoke, yes, His Excellency. For I find the concluding lines of his throne speech 2021 to be so apt and so applicable to our situation in Dennery North and the Mabuya Valley. Mr. Speaker, the unassailable, unvarnished truth is that we in Dennery North are battle-scarred. Our lives and our constituency have been made to suffer by a wicked and uncaring government. We have been made to suffer immensely for our unequivocal support for Shawn Edward and the St. Lucia Labour Party. But we are not defeated. We will not lie like dry bones on the floor of national politics. We will not be defined by the sufferings and victimization of the past 5 years. We are a resilient people. We are a hardworking people. We are a proud people. We are the lion-hearted people of the Mabuya Valley. Mr. Speaker, a people of unconquerable spirit. When the Prime Minister, as fidgety as he is in terms of announcing a date for general election, whether he does it on a radio station that is pro his party, or he decides to do it in the parliament, or in an address to the nation, this will be the first step to redemption for the people of Dennery North who have not gotten their fair share of this national pie. Because, Mr. Speaker, in their majority, they continue to go to the 5 polling stations in Dennery North to repose their confidence in Shawn Edward and the St. Lucia Labour Party. Mr. Speaker, I want to say finally to my people that hope is on the horizon. We were tried, but we did not break. We are still standing firm. And Mr. Speaker, when the ballots are counted on the night of election, and if there will be need for a recount, which I doubt very much in Dennery North, the St. Lucia Labour Party and Shawn Edward will be standing tall with victory under our belts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my contribution to the debate on the estimates 2021-2022.